Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Donald J. Trump is now president. The question is, how long will it take to get his cabinet and his key agency picks confirmed so that they can get things rolling? The handlers of Joe the Demented did their best to leave his depends full of you-know-what all over the White House and the American government. I previously suggested that the 25th Amendment be used to block many of his crazy and anti-American edicts made between the time of the election and finally getting him out of the White House. At the same time, as Americans adjust to the horrific terrorist attack in the French Quarter in New Orleans on New Year's morning, more horror in Los Angeles with at least 24 dead and what may be the most expensive disaster in American history. Time for the Trump cabinet picks to be confirmed. John Lennon, of Beatles fame, wrote a poignant song recorded in 1969, not with the Beatles. Give peace a chance. Time for the scum-sucking Dems who have just had their butts kicked to get smart and stop damaging America. Approve the nominees now and let's get America back on track. The worst of Trump nominees, in my opinion, are RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, but hey, one is still a Democrat and the other one used to be a Democrat. Every Trump nominee is better than the best of the losers in the Biden administration. And I don't fear any contradiction on that one, folks. I hope the voters understand that the mess that America is in right now is so bad that it cannot be corrected quickly. My hope is that enough progress will be made, despite the resistance from the left, that this administration will get a full 4 years to do what they can. Many pundits have predicted recently that Americans, even Californians and New Yorkers, see that the Dems are not helping anyone but themselves. The predictions of a dominant GOP have been wrong before, of course. See 2020 and 2022, right? We at Saving America try and maintain this show under PG standards, meaning no profanity. Hard to do that with the deliberate landmines that Biden's handlers have left. From billions more in student loan forgiveness to more limits on offshore drilling to moving agency positions around so that the various agency managers will be the ones that resist Trump, at least initially. They've also done what they can to extend amnesty to many illegals who should never have been allowed into this country. Our disrespectful and wonky VP refused to host a visit in D.C. with Vance and his wife. Meanwhile, Joe the Demented took a victory lap to give speeches about how great he is leaving America. One part is true. Since he's out of government for the first time in 50 years, America is definitely on a better track. Bad deal for Israel. Biden and Trump both claim credit. My regular audience members know that while I despise Biden and his handlers, I am a conservative and not a Trumpster. If I was Trump, I would not take credit for the crummy deal that did not return every single one of the hostages, and certainly not a deal that released a single terrorist prisoner. Hamas is down, but not dead. They need to be dead, folks. This is the only fix for the current mess. Israel has done very good, but the job is not done. Hamas needs to be exterminated like the cockroaches that they are. And the Houthis in Yemen need to be exterminated as well. Los Angeles burns while pretty boy Newsom tries to pretend it's not his and his party's fault. I want to extend my condolences to the families who have lost loved ones in the terrible fires consuming the Los Angeles area and to those whose homes and businesses have been destroyed. While I have not lost a loved one in this manner, I have experienced a major fire here in Houston. In contrast, however, to California, the fire department controlled the blaze and the neighborhood was intact, providing me the support I needed to rebuild. There's a ton of blame to spread around in Los Angeles. The state has spent money like it is toilet paper, but have not done basic stuff like serious fire protection and fire precautions. At the local level, you have Karen Bass, the clueless mayor of LA. She promised when she ran for mayor to be local, no foreign junkets. Well, she was in Africa when the fires started in LA. That does not seem like staying home and minding the store. Reports are also that Bass pulled $17 million out of the fire department budget. She was trying to walk that back a few days ago. I don't know how successful she will be. The horrors of the mass destruction and at least 24 deaths belongs to the failures of competence, selling the climate change hoax at the expense of doing basic stuff like clearing brush in forested areas. Further adding to the disaster is the possible lack of insurance funds and the insurance companies spreading the risk to the rest of Californians and perhaps throughout the United States. The environmental impact is so large it's hard to estimate. The ravaged land is now full of debris, much of it toxic. It can wash into watersheds and may cause mudslides on barren hills. Anticipate persons with breathing issues encountering even more severe exposures. Removing the debris presents its own basket of problems. A good plan involves not building on every square inch of real estate and specifically setting up buffer zones with no easily flammable trees or other material in them. In Florida, houses in some areas have to be hurricane resistant. Why did Los Angeles not require that new buildings be constructed of less flammable materials? The fire department administration in LA is a DEI mess. No wonder half the fire trucks are in need of repair. No wonder that despite the record high fire risk, a skeleton crew was on watch the night the major fires began. And let's protect those criminal illegals from deportation despite federal law. Over a period of several days, small fires were deliberately set and illegals were implicated, at least initially. Fortunately, those did not blow into the two major fires. If there's a silver lining to this stupidity, I would hope that not a single person in America considers that bag of hot air, that wannabe actor Newsom, should ever be a candidate for president. Trump pushing for a fair number on SALT. When I saw stories on this topic, I thought immediately of a famous SALT acronym, Strategic Arms Limitation Treaty. However, this is a different SALT. This is state and local tax deductions. During the first Trump administration, deduction of these taxes was limited for residential use to $10,000 per year to help pay for the Trump big tax cuts in 2017. The report is that he is getting bipartisan pushback from high tax states like New York, California, and New Jersey. Well, I would like to add Texas to that list. It was a long tradition that such taxes would be fully deductible from federal taxation to avoid what is double taxation. So SALT was a big deal. As money continues tight for many families, the limit on this deduction has increased in spreading the pain. Trump has indicated now that he is open to a fair increase. We'll see about that. The problem is that lower tax states, many of them red states, do not like giving such big tax deductions in those high tax states. However, given the surging taxes here in Texas, and I have heard big increases in popular Florida, there might be less opposition than has been suggested. I had to mention the Biden going away speech. It was especially humorous when he expressed concern about an oligarchy ruling America. So it was okay when Bezos and Zuckerberg were still on his side. It was okay for him to take billions from them and people like George Soros. It's not okay for him to waste precious legal resources on lawfare, and not just against Trump, but against many of his supporters. Joe, thank goodness you're out of the White House. Shut up and go away. FDA bans red food dye due to potential cancer risk. Gee, they're just figuring it out now. Nearly 3,000 foods are shown to contain red number 3. It is now banned in foods starting in January 2027. Drug manufacturers have all the way until January 2028 to remove it from oral medications. A fascinating footnote is that the cosmetic use, that's right, simply using on your skin, was banned 35 years ago in this country. It has been banned in Europe for many years. In fact, frequently mentioned by RFK Jr., and that should cause all Americans to despise the FDA and its slow walk on this ruling. As one of those people, read the labels on all foods before buying them. I have not knowingly purchased things with this potential carcinogen in them. However, that does not mean that my children and grandchildren have not been exposed to them due to the sloppiness of the FDA. As an alternative, some dietitians have suggested beets, pomegranates, strawberries, and raspberries. You can dry them and then grind them up to make healthy red colors that are not harmful to our wonderful children. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I'm sure that you will agree that he deserves the moniker of interesting person. Saving America welcomes Simon Hankinson for his first appearance on Saving America. He is a senior research fellow in the Border Security Immigration Center at the Heritage Foundation. From 1999 to 2023, he was a Foreign Service officer serving in, get this list of countries, India, Fiji, Ghana, Slovakia, Togo, Washington, D.C., well, Washington's in there, Marseille, and Nairobi. Prior to entering the State Department, Hankinson worked as a lawyer in London and then taught history, English, and drama at a private school in Miami. That's quite a background. Hankinson holds a master's degree in modern history from St. Andrews, Scotland. I was there this summer. Beautiful place. Wow. And has a degree from the College of Law in London and a master's degree in international security affairs from the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. We've invited Simon to share some of his recent research on important security topics. First one is, I read the article you wrote with Emma Waters, American Surrogates and Birthright Citizenship, with interest. What's happening here and how can it be corrected? And I know that this is in the news this week because of the, Trump putting his cabinet together and stuff.
Yeah, this is not such a high profile issue as compared to, say, birth tourism. But it really is a little worrying. It's one of those things, that is made possible by advancing technology. There's so many good things. Couples who want a child can have one when maybe 50 years ago they can't. But nothing, comes without problems. And there's always another side. So under the current interpretation of the 14th Amendment, which some of my colleagues here at Heritage and other legal scholars would argue is erroneous, that obviously was an amendment right after the Civil War to protect former slaves, Black Americans,
Yes,
from losing any of their rights. We wanted to make sure that they were protected. If they were born in the United States, their citizenship couldn't be taken away from them, et cetera. But obviously that was before jet planes and even steamships. So you didn't have the ease of travel that you have today. And we have had a phenomenon of birth tourism for many years. It used to be women from Mexico generally would sort of hop across the border to give birth. That way their child would be an American citizen, and then down the line could petition for them. So they called them anchor babies. Sometimes it was just because the hospital was better, and it wasn't always a negative or at least a self-interested reason. But that was the phenomenon for, let's say, the post-war period early on. But then in the past, say, 4 or 5 decades, we have seen women coming from all over the world, from China, from India, from Nigeria, from wherever, anyone who has enough money could come to the United States, give birth, that child would become an American citizen, and it became sort of a status thing. And then you had companies setting up packages. You've got Chinese companies in California that will give a whole soup to nuts package for women from China. They can fly into the country, put them up in a nice hotel, go to Disneyland, shopping trips, massages, whatever, give birth, and whenever you're ready to go home, you go home with your newly minted American citizen child. Well, that child may have absolutely no connection to the United States. Their family may never pay taxes, may never be involved in the community or volunteer for, the military or the fire department or anything. But yet, at least for that child, they're a citizen for life. It doesn't necessarily pass on to their children, but that's a sort of complicated citizenship law. And the problem with where it sort of collides with the IVF world is that technology is so good today that you can have a couple, say, it could be two men, two women, a man and a woman of any age, whatever, arrange with an American or a person resident in America, a woman. I'm going to use the word woman. I hope that's okay with your audience, and I hope I don't need to define it, but
for sure.
So someone who is capable of conceiving and bearing children. So you could ship over sperm and an egg and have them assembled, in a donor, let's say a carrier woman. You could have a woman be inseminated with. There are all kinds of different possibilities. But the most, let's say, remote is that you could have a child born in the United States of foreign ingredients, foreign egg, foreign sperm. So neither parent is an American citizen or is even here in the United States. And this child is not related biologically to the mother and is born and becomes a U.S. citizen at birth, which I think would strike most people as weird, because
yes,
that clearly wasn't the intent of the 14th Amendment. And as my colleague who did a lot of research on this discovered, some states have rules about this kind of surrogacy arrangement. Other states have none. And so it's kind of cowboy country. And just like any other medical procedure, if there's no limits on it whatsoever, you will have a few bad actors who will exploit it. And it seems like a loophole that should be closed, at least to us, that it shouldn't be possible for two foreign nationals to conceive a foreign national child in the United States that then acquires all of the benefits of U.S. citizenship, but with absolutely no roots in the United States or even to an American.
Absolutely incredible. Staying on track here, your article, America's alarmingly high terror threat just keeps climbing the more we fling open our doors. And you highlight a very critical issue. What do you recommend for the incoming Trump administration to somehow reduce this terror threat? We've heard what Tom Homan proposes to do, but are there things local police could do, of course, if they're not pretending to be a sanctuary city?
Well, this is one of the easier questions to answer, because we simply need to flip back through the pages of time to about January 10th, 2020, and simply reinstate the policies that were working in that period to control the flow over the border. Now, I don't think there's ever been a time in the last century when the U.S.-Mexican border, let alone the U.S.-Canada border, was 100% sealed. Not a squirrel could get through. That's not ever the ambition. The ambition is to have control over the border so that we mostly know who's coming and we can mostly intercept dangerous individuals and drugs and so on. And in the last 4 years, it has been possible for criminals and terrorists to come in amidst the millions of people that are being paroled or released at the border. And you just have to do some basic math. It's not a question of every person coming to the United States being a criminal or a terrorist. Of course, that's not statistically likely. That's not the case. But if you look at the murder rate in the United States, it's about 5 in 100,000. In some countries, it's much higher. In Mexico, it's, I think, 25 in 100,000. So let's just take that as a baseline. If you have 100,000 people coming in, then it's conceivable 25 of them have criminal records for murder, right? Or will commit murder. And that within a given population of 1 million people, in the United States, a certain percentage of them will have criminal records for everything from theft to assault to rape to murder. And the question is, who are those people? And in our normal immigrant visa system, where you're interviewing at a consulate overseas, I've probably done, I don't know, 50,000 of those in my career, immigrant and non-immigrant tourist visas. For the immigrants, the ones who are coming permanently, they have to submit a police clearance from their home country. They have to submit a medical check. Now, could they lie? Could they? Yeah, they could. But it's much, much harder. They at least have to go to their local police and obtain some kind of document. And you have local staff there who speak the language. More than once, I've had my local staff come up to me and say, hey, that person you just interviewed, I remember seeing him in the newspaper last week. You know, he's wanted in a corruption trial or whatever. And we would find out that people were no good. When they show up at the southern border, they are currently, and I hope this is put to a stop pretty soon, they are simply processed, meaning they take their fingerprints, ask them their name, say, show us your documents. They all very often say, oh, I don't have any documents because I threw them in the river on the way over. You go down there to the border, you will see piles of documents. They try to clean them up because it's embarrassing, but I picked up like a whole handful. I picked up residency cards from Peru, Turkey, all over the world that people had just dropped, including refugee cards from other countries where they were already given refugee status. Now, if you're a criminal or a terrorist, you might not want to go that route. You might not want to just show up and surrender to Border Patrol and wait till you get released, because there's always a slim chance that you would be in some U.S. database. Incredibly unlikely, but let's say you're an Afghan terrorist or you're a known whatever extremist from the Middle East. You might be in our system, Iraqi or whatever. So then you'd sneak in as a gotaway, and the estimates are at least 2 million people have been able to enter the United States without any observation or any encounter with an agent. So they haven't been, their name hasn't been recorded, they haven't been interviewed, they haven't been asked any questions. So you have to extrapolate. If we're catching, it's over a couple hundred, I think, at this point, people who were actually either surrendered to or caught by Border Patrol and found to have some kind of terrorist record in our watch list database. You have to assume that some of them came in and didn't surrender or get caught by Border Patrol. They're among those 2 million that got in. And, best case, these are guys who were, they're retired terrorists, and they've come here and they're just going to go and become, happy farmers and leave everybody alone. But there's always a possibility. To give you one example, there's the Afghan who came here. I don't know whether he was paroled or released at the border, but he was an illegal immigrant who was allowed in by this administration, knowingly, consciously, who planned a terrorist attack on the last election on November 5th. And fortunately, he was discovered beforehand and he didn't get away with it. But individuals like that have never had it easier in terms of entering the United States. And the odds of one of them sooner or later being able to do something that's going to hurt American citizens, I would say, is pretty high.
It's just an amazing and difficult situation, and I'm glad your article puts a fine point on it. The third article we're going to spend most of the time on, and this is a report you did with Aaron Schneidezon. Trendy Aragua is also a more convenient acronym. TDA is this terrorist gang from Venezuela. I am hearing some incredible reports, and it's just like a few months ago, all of a sudden we heard about some apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado, and now I'm hearing it's in 26 states have been identified. Tell our audience a little bit about TDA, what's going on, what does the Trump administration need to do basically on day one?
Well, this is I wrote a piece actually not quite a year ago, and I said in it, if you haven't heard of Trendy Aragua, you soon will. And those are pretty prophetic words, because at that point, I hadn't even heard of them. I was at a conference in Miami, and an expert on Trendy Aragua and crime in Latin America, Joseph Humeyer, told me about them. And I did a little research, and I thought, okay, this is not going to be good, because Venezuela was exporting, I think 8 million people have left Venezuela under Chavez and Maduro. And they're kicking out lots of ones that they don't want to have around because either they're opponents or criminals or whatever. We've only taken probably 1 million plus. A lot of them are in Colombia and other countries, but still among the million are many members of this gang. It was formed, give or take, a decade ago, we think, in the Tocaron prison. They are very violent. They deal in drugs. They do extortion. They pimp out young women. They do all of the kind of rotten things that gangs do and organized crime does. I wouldn't call them terrorists because they're not linked to the state. They're not trying to overthrow the United States. They're just trying to take over networks of crime and make money. So they came in over the southern border. In many cases, they were caught, meaning like they encountered the border patrol and then they were released and told, hey, show up at an immigration hearing in 6 months, whatever, a year. Some of them were paroled in under this special Biden program: Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. 30,000 a month from those 4 countries. Basically, they were allowed to schedule their appointment to enter the country illegally, and then they were given this status called parole, which is not really a status. It's sort of a, you're allowed in, but not in any really legal capacity other than we're not going to deport you. I mean, I've written a lot about parole. It was designed for very specific circumstances for very few people, case by case, a couple hundred a year, and it was used in a really egregious way under this administration to let in, like 1.5 million people. And they've gone to, they took over apartment complexes in Aurora, Colorado. They basically went back to doing what they were doing in Venezuela, which is organized crime. We've found them now in New York City. There was the murder of the college student in Georgia, Laken Riley, was by someone who reportedly was either a member or associated with the gang, as was his brother. There have been cases in San Antonio, in Dallas, in El Paso. So it is creeping. And I think there was a report in Fox News recently that was referencing a Homeland Security report. So it's now a well-known phenomenon that has disseminated itself through the country faster than any other gang that I recall. And we know about MS-13, and there's other foreign and homemade gangs. But this one, thanks to the policies at the border, has been able to get large numbers of soldiers, let's call them, of active members in an incredibly short time, and they've been very busy. And everything from smash and grab jewelry store robberies to petty theft, cell phone theft rings, pimping, and unfortunately murder and violent crime.
Well, it's a rather extraordinary situation. What would you say that the Trump administration needs to do to kind of kick in and really move the ball forward? Because, I mean, I'm in Houston, Texas. The advantage that we have here is that the police will actually shoot people if they don't cooperate being arrested. And we've just had a election, including a local election, where every Democrat judge who had a Republican opponent, the Republican was elected. I think we have 12 new Republican judges. They were specifically elected on stop the violence, stop releasing criminals back out to do more violence. So is that what we need elsewhere?
Yeah, I think, I hope that if these guys think that they can get away with what they were doing in Venezuela in Texas, they're going to be sadly mistaken. And that's essentially all that's needed is law enforcement. We've had these prosecutors in our big cities from New York to San Francisco that don't prosecute. They were elected with money from left-wing groups on, sort of social justice, alternatives to punishment kind of ideology. They don't want to put criminals in jail. So you have these no bail policies where you can't have cash bail because that's discriminatory against people who can't afford it. And they're releasing people, criminals, time and time again out onto the streets. So we need essentially law enforcement at the national level and at the local level. That's what will take care of Tren de Aragua. First of all, stop the flow at the border, reinstate remain in Mexico. The supply will dry up when they're all forced to wait in Mexico for their entire process to come through. We need to finish building a wall or some kind of barrier across the length of the border so that people are channeled to ports of entry and places where they can be properly, I wouldn't say properly vetted because that's still not going to be possible, but better than they're doing in the field right now before they release them. We need to stop releasing them until we know who they are, until we actually know what criminal record they have. And if we can't find that out, maybe we should strongly consider not letting them in at all. And then if they are here, if they've been able to get in on parole, on release pending their removal hearings, whatever their status is, they should be fully accountable for their actions. There shouldn't be a special status just because you're an illegal immigrant. If I drive down the street and I get pulled over by a cop for speeding and I'm drunk, they will punish me. They'll put me in jail maybe, or fine me, or take my car away, or whatever. If you have no insurance, no legal status, no license plate, and they just let you go, what's the deterrent? There isn't one. So we have to take that person and do to him what they would do to you and me, except if they are here illegally, they should also have the removal process take place at the end of the criminal process. And, one by one, case by case, the word will get out and we will reestablish the rule of law. But I would say that's what we've lost in the last 4 years. We've lost it in our cities and we've lost it at the border. And I think the political consequences you just described and the national election that we had have shown that people's patience has run out and they're fed up and they want the government and law enforcement to do its job.
Well, Simon Hankinson, it has been terrific to get a chance to meet you and share some of your thoughts with our audience. And again, you are distributed. Your articles have been distributed through the Heritage Foundation, and we encourage people to look you up there. How can our audience get more information about you and the Heritage Foundation? Well,
heritage.org is probably the fastest place to go. I put my articles out on Twitter or X I'm at WatchfulWaiter1. And you can just Google me and the articles all come up. I have a column that I put out every week. I just did one this morning called The Borderline. And you can also Google that. It's always immigration, border related stories, changing week to week. And I've tackled Tren de Aragua at least 3 times now, unfortunately.
Yes, I understand. Well, what a value to the country and to the United States, and we certainly appreciate it. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. The badge of dishonor today belongs to Boise State University. By the way, I have actually been to Boise, Idaho. It was many years ago. It seemed like the perfect small American town, supporting basic American values. I guess something has changed since I was there. The facts of this story were from coverage in the New York Post and Fox News. The headline is that big city coffee owner Sarah Fenley opened a coffee shop on the campus in September 2020. Part of the story is not in dispute. She had a thin blue line support decal on the front door of the shop. A student then posted something negative about it on social media. Fenley responded with her support for the police. Then Boise State administrators got involved. From there was controversy about what the administrators told her. In any event, the shop was closed in just 4 days. She then sued and won a unanimous jury verdict against Boise State. The award was $3 million for lost business, reputational damage, mental and emotional distress, and personal humiliation. Jurors awarded her an additional $1 million in punitive damages from the school's former vice president of student affairs. The basis of the case was the university administrators conspired to retaliate against her for expressing pro-police views on social media, which would be a First Amendment constitutional violation because this is a public university. Jurors deliberated for only 3 hours before reaching this unanimous decision for Fenley. Boise State vigorously defended its position, claiming that Fenley made her own decision to close the coffee shop. Reports are that the large verdict will be appealed by the university to the Idaho Supreme Court. That's not unexpected, folks. So Saving America today awards today's F grade to Boise State University for fighting diversity on campus by opposing a small business owner who supported law and order. This is Dr. David D. Schein for Saving America. Thanks for joining us, and subscribe on your favorite platform. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. A New York Catholic diocese is appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court on a state abortion coverage mandate. The case is called Roman Catholic Diocese of Albany, New York versus Harris. This Harris is Adrian A. Harris, the superintendent of the New York Department of Financial Services. The trigger for this case is a 2017 New York statute requiring that all group health plans cover abortions. The law exempted religious organizations with the purpose of serving their fellow religious members. However, the law did not exempt religious organizations which were engaged in serving the community without regard to religion. So the Catholics and the Baptists sued to block the law applying to this second set of functions. They have lost in the New York courts, but made one trip to SCOTUS in 2021, where the case was remanded back to the state courts. SCOTUS referenced in its June 2021 remand a case called Fulton versus Philadelphia. In that case, SCOTUS unanimously ruled that a Roman Catholic charity in Pennsylvania may refuse on First Amendment religious freedom grounds that they would not allow children to be placed with same-sex couples. Unfortunately, the New York courts have again ruled against the religious organizations where the services are beyond its mission to serve its own congregations. It held that Fulton did not apply and that the state rule here did not violate the First Amendment. The trial attorney for the churches noted that they are being penalized for extending their charitable activities beyond their immediate congregations. So the plaintiff religious organizations are heading back to SCOTUS for a second time. Note that the track record with the current SCOTUS is 3-0 in favor of the religious organizations. So I'm betting on them winning against the state of New York this time as well. And folks, this is a sad situation because you have charities that are willing to provide at their cost help to members of the public who need more help. We know that New York has been complaining about the financial burden of illegals who have been sent there by the Biden administration and by some southern states, and yet they're apparently frustrating the direction of trying to have charities provide public help, but then want to place burdens on them that they're not willing to incur. I don't think it's good policy. In one of the two most important decisions by the current U.S. Supreme Court, the 40-year-old Chevron doctrine is gone. For a business in America, dealing with administrative agencies can be very challenging. These agencies create the rules, enforce the rules, and then their paid employees adjudicate disputes over possible violations of the agency's own rules. If a business is unhappy with the outcome after exhausting all those internal steps, it can go to court. This is an extremely costly process in itself. Most small and even fairly large businesses cannot afford to do the fight. But even if the business can get to court, it's not usually a fair fight. The reason is something called the Chevron doctrine. This is the result of a SCOTUS ruling in 1984 in the case Chevron versus the Natural Resources Defense Council. The court held in that case that it was appropriate for the court to defer to the expertise of the government agency when facing an appeal of an agency decision. This is the infamous placing a thumb on the scales of justice. In a 6-3 decision in Loper Bright Enterprises et al. Versus Raimundo, Secretary of Commerce et al., all the conservative justices voted in favor of striking down Chevron. Chief Justice John Roberts stated the majority decision. Courts must exercise their independent judgment in deciding whether an agency has acted within its statutory authority. The Chief Justice further explained that agencies are not really supposed to make statutory interpretations. because agencies have no special competence in resolving statutory ambiguities. Courts do. A key concept here is that the so-called administrative state is staffed with unelected bureaucrats who are not answerable to the will of the people. The belief is that this ruling will provide a more satisfactory balance of power. Baby born in parking lot of a Michigan microbrewery. The story has been picked up by various media sources. I referred to the local Kalamazoo newspaper for the best information. So Aaron Baker gets a call from his wife, Kyle, and says it's time to go to the hospital to deliver their third child. The first children came in a normal fashion, so he's not stressing it. Apparently underestimated the speed of numbers three's determination to arrive. Predictably, the little fellow is ready to charge out, and so Aaron calls 911 on he and his wife's way to the hospital, asks for the ambulance to meet them along the route. Well, 2 blocks ahead is the couple's favorite microbrewery, One Well Brewing. So he says, meet us in the parking lot at the brewery. Well, the little fellow had a different idea. He starts to pop out before they even get to the parking lot. Once they're in the parking lot, the dad jumps out of the driver's seat, runs around the passenger seat, and delivers the little fellow safely. Then the ambulance takes the baby and mom away, and they're fine. The brewery has a new blood orange brew, and it's naming it Special Delivery after the incident. When the baby, Forrest is his name, is old enough to drink, he's been awarded free beer for life by the brewery. My regular audience knows that I'm a hardcore anti-communist. Due to a series of failures by both political parties in the U.S., communism has risen from the dung heap of history. Anyone that thinks communism is a good idea is simply uninformed or stupid. The most significant effort to impose it was the USSR, and it officially failed 33 years ago after a sad and multi-millions dead experiment in Russia and nearby countries. The ruins of the countries formerly known as Venezuela and Cuba, near to the USA, and the incredible communist death toll around the world document the fact that communism does not work. Vietnam, taken over by a violent communist operation, has gone capitalism to save itself. Red China surged to success when it switched to capitalism around 1980-85 to the late 1990s. Xi, its current deranged leader, reversed that success by trying to restore old-fashioned Marxist and Maoist concepts. The country is in big financial trouble with many young people not having jobs. Gee, I wonder why they've messed it up. Xi is so paranoid that he ordered oppression of the followers of Falun Gong. What horrible things do these followers believe? They believe in meditation. That's right, as some people say, sitting around and studying your navel. And so, the cult has attracted about 1 million followers since the mid-1990s. Then around 1999, Xi decided that these people were enemies of the state. Terrible things like prison camps, torture, and the use of their body parts for other patients have been documented. The open persecution of this sect has now spread to the U.S. First, we are a sovereign nation. Why would the Red Chinese have any ability to continue its terror campaign on our soil? Second, the approach is reportedly widespread. It includes attacks on Shenyun Performing Group and the media company, the Epoch Times. Both companies were founded by Falun Gong practitioners in the early 2000s by Chinese Americans in response to the persecution taking place in Red China. Shenyun refers to its colorful performances as China before communism. A handful of disgruntled former performers have been presented as the face of the organization, not the vast majority of performers who enjoy being with the group. The latest on this situation in the U.S. is that the FBI is investigating a mass shooting threat in Atlanta regarding upcoming performances by Shenyun. The sender threatened to attack theatergoers if the venue hosts the dance troupe. Third, America, to win the new Cold War, must be able to get its story out there by running the reverse, letting Falun Gong practitioners know that the Americans support them around the world. This reminds me of the radio campaigns the U.S. used to run. Time to get the word out there now. Obviously, we cannot let organs from China be used by transplant patients here in the U.S. as a simple example. I've sent emails to 2 different contact emails associated with Schein and Falun Gong, inviting them to interview with Saving America, but have not had a response yet. In an interesting Newsmax story, Speaker of the House Mike Johnson has announced a website where Americans can check if their names were used for unauthorized political donations. This is related to a House Republicans' investigation into potential foreign influence on the Act Blue fundraising platform. The report indicates that House investigators are examining whether entities from Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and China may have directed funds to support Democrat campaigns in 2024 through Act Blue. This is very serious since foreign contributions to U.S. campaigns are illegal. And with the above report, a Harris campaign spending over $2 billion, reasonable minds want to know, where did all that money come from? Saving America welcomes Dr. Matthew Garrett. He is recently retired professor of history and ethnic studies at Bakersfield College. Dr. Garrett's colleagues repeatedly elected him to campus-wide office, and he received numerous awards, including the institution's Lifetime Leadership Award in 2021. He is also an award-winning author with research and publications in Native American history, and his musings appear in both popular and academic journals. However, Dr. Garrett risked his reputation and tenure to question partisan policies and expenditures at his college. He rallied 24 faculty at his institution to found the Renegade Institute for Liberty, dedicated to civil debate on matters of public interest and to advocate for Western ideals like free speech, free markets, and equal treatment under the law. In 2020, his college issued disciplinary action, and it was circulated to the local media, and Garrett responded with a First Amendment lawsuit in 2021. That suit was later amended to reflect continued retaliation, and after a lengthy legal proceeding, Dr. Garrett and Kern Community College District have agreed on a significant settlement that has made national headlines. Before we begin our interview with Dr. Garrett, here is the statement of the Kern Community College District. It has, to quote, settled all issues with Matthew Garrett. To be clear, the dispute with Matthew Garrett was a disciplinary matter due to his disruptive actions on campus, none of which concerned freedom of speech. Kern Community College District unequivocally supports the right for our students and faculty to share their views and opinions on campus and elsewhere. As this is a confidential personnel matter, we will not comment further. Whoa. I also want to acknowledge that I was a guest on the Bakersfield College campus through Dr. Garrett a couple of years ago. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world truly is full of interesting people. We welcome Dr. Matthew Garrett for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, you didn't doze off while we were doing that long introduction?
No.
Okay, first of all, tell our audience how DEI factored into your dispute with Bakersfield College.
Sure. Well, following the death of George Floyd in 2020, there was a new fervor that crossed the nation, and our college was no different. There in Bakersfield, which had always really been a very moderate, non-political sort of entity, our campus leadership held some meetings and rolled out this new racial equity commitment. And of course, I would imagine your listeners are familiar with the concept of equity. It's about adjusting, controlling outcomes to make sure everything is the same. So racial equity would be to ensure that all racial groups have the same outcomes. And so along with that came a flurry of new programs. We're going to start recruiting faculty based on their race. They instituted a new acronym, which I'd never heard before, URMs, underrepresented minorities, who are going to receive favoritism in employment. And of course, this is not legal in California, which in 1996 banned racial preferences. It is legal in some states to do some sort of quotas and things, but not in California. And so there was this flurry of new activity, energy, new DEI speakers brought in. There was one gentleman they contracted repeatedly and paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell us his political views about why we need to treat one racial group different than another. I remember one contract was $180,000 for 42 hours of trainings. And Dave, you're better at math than me, I think, because of the business background, but I think that's something like $4,200 an hour for
Pretty
DEI
close.
training. So this sort of just insanity was grinding on a lot of us. And so I organized faculty, we discussed, we debated, we raised concerns, pointed out some of the expenditure problems, questioned why money was going to partisan groups, organized a petition to the board to ask them to not approve the racial quotas. The board ignored us and moved forward with the racial quotas, said they needed to reduce white employee population from something like 60% down to 24% and needed to increase Hispanic population from 30% to 60% or something like that. And so there was this real aggressive move, and we started to ask questions that really grinded, I think, onto the social justice advocates. They did not like having those discussions. They didn't want to defend those positions. And so it escalated with sort of nasty emails on campus and, committee room discussions. It escalated until October 2022, when one of the social justice leaders, a woman who leads the racially segregated classes, brought her students to a meeting, and then her students began accusing me and a couple others of some sort of racial misconduct during a meeting. They didn't know that I recorded that meeting, and so we had clear evidence that they were making it up, but they went from venue to venue spouting these allegations and eventually manipulating the Board of Trustees to believe and take incorrect action based on those allegations.
Wow, something else. Our second question, how did the statement from one of the members of the Kern Community College District Board of Trustees factor into your own situation? He wanted to cull, C-U-L-L, the conservative faculty and take them to the slaughterhouse. So it sounds like he was treating you like cattle.
Yeah, that's Trustee John Corkins, who's a rancher. And when this race hoax was brought to the board, and they brought in a faculty member, a student, a couple of community activists, none of these people have I ever even met, were ranting on about how white supremacy was overrunning the school and it was all my fault and students were being threatened and this just utter nonsense allegations. In response to that, Trustee Corkins articulated how it was hard to get rid of bad faculty and that he'd really like to treat them like he does his cattle, which is to take us out to his slaughterhouse and end our lives, which was just horribly gruesome, violent language. And really, I don't have any anger or animus towards him over it. I understand if he believed those things to be true, I understand him being concerned about them. But I think I pity him because it speaks to his naivete that he would believe these really vague, silly, obviously self-contradictory sort of comments. And it really put him in a bad light. It put the position of the school in a bad light. As we went forward through the hearing, it became obvious that everything was manufactured. And I think it left he and the district on the hook for quite a bit of damages. Faculty, not just me, but other faculty feel very much afraid, intimidated, silenced. There's a recent climate survey that was conducted where dozens and dozens of employees say they're afraid to speak because of this sort of climate, that they know that if they have the wrong viewpoints, they'll be targeted by a social justice leader. They'll manipulate the board to attack them. The human resources or whoever else will target them. And the entire system will come against them if they dare to express a different opinion. So I think that the comment carries a lot of weight and did a lot of damage.
Wow. Well, and our third question is a little bit of a change of pace because you have now, as we've talked about, been really through the ringer. What is your best advice you can give to a conservative college faculty member in a liberal college, which of course most of them are at the moment?
Yeah, I think that before you do anything, you need to understand that it's a difficult path to go down. It's better to just be left alone, right? Tenure isn't what people think it is. In California, at least, tenure just means that before you're fired, you have the right to a hearing, an administrative court hearing, and that can be quite expensive. The state has essentially unlimited funds at its disposal to litigate and appeal indefinitely. In my case, by the time we settled, I had already lost $500,000 in legal fees and back wages by the time we agreed to a settlement. So unless you're prepared to really do that, they're going to try and starve you out. But if you're prepared to go that route, if you're willing to risk it all to defend, truth, virtues of Western society, like equal treatment under the law and free speech, then there are some steps that I would recommend. One of them is to make sure you have a group of trusted people, because you want some that are public and some that are not so public, because it makes it harder for them to target you. In my case, half the department chairs had signed their names next to mine. There was a lot of institutional strength from that side to make it hard to sort of pick on me a little bit. They still did, but it gave me quite a bit of strength. And then private friends as well. When we got to the hearing, I was shocked at the outright lies that people would say under oath. And it was really quite helpful to have them then turn to committee chairs and say, that's what happened, right? And then the committee chairs would say, no, that's not what happened. And so it was really advantageous to have quite a few friends who were committed to telling the truth because they weren't out to get me. That's not always an option though, right? Another thing to do is to record everything. I recorded everything. I recorded every public meeting I could legally record, and I recommend the same to everyone else, because that's what really saved me. They made up all sorts of lies, and a recording made the difference. Also, emails, oh my goodness. They made all sorts of crazy statements that we could easily disprove by email. So make sure you're keeping records. Also, I'd say pick your punches. You can't fight every single thing, right? There's just too much of it. It's crazy. So in my case, the first thing I really took issue with was I gave a lecture on free speech, the importance of free speech, and how I was concerned that social justice activities were infringing on free speech. Now, they went ahead and disciplined me for that anyway, but that was a particularly, I was aware of the optics. I didn't think that they would really be foolish enough to discipline a speech on free speech, but you never really know. But choose your optics, and that really helps also with building community relations. I think that's a key. It's building community relations. And in my case, we probably buried the Board of Trustees in hundreds of letters from the community demanding, outraged by what was going on campus. And so that entailed me having to go to committee meeting groups and saying, look, here's what's going on. Here's some of the evidence. You really should be concerned about the loss of your institution, this ideological capture of your college. And I didn't sign up to be an activist. I didn't want to go to all these meetings, but that became an important part of sort of building a defense against it. And then I think the other thing that I wish I had done was I wish I had fundraised from the very start. I started a fundraiser at the end when it got pretty desperate, but I wish I had started at the beginning because, as I mentioned to you earlier, this is incredibly expensive. And I didn't launch it earlier because I didn't want to feel like I was exploiting people or anything for money. But as it became hundreds of thousands of dollars and I was in way over my head financially, I wish I had started that earlier. So as soon as they begin to target you, maybe it's not too early to start a fundraiser to challenge for a legal defense fee for whatever might come along or something.
Fascinating situation. How can our audience get more information about you and about some of the struggles that you faced?
Well, despite suddenly becoming this public figure activist, I'm really not that public. I don't have a web page. I don't have much of an active Twitter account. But you could find information, I suppose, by Google. There's a lot of news stories. Fox has done coverage. The College Fix and Just the News have both done excellent coverage on the case. I have a GoFundMe fundraiser page that I've suspended, no longer collecting funds, but it still exists. And if you visit that page, you can find a link to quite a few older articles. Authors like Jonathan Turley have addressed it. It's showed up in all sorts of venues. So there's quite a bit of media out there that can be read about, though you're not likely to find much of me on the web. I don't have that much of a presence.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.